Hallo liebe Leute, herzlich willkommen beim Remote Tasting Lab. Wir freuen uns sehr, dass ihr dabei seid. Das sind Andreas Wickhoff vom Weingut Bründlmayer und Lecturer am IMC für den Bachelor of International Wine Business. Ich von der Abothek und die Fachhochschule Krems mit dem Bachelor of International Wine Business vertreten durch die Studenten hier. Und das Remote Tasting Lab ist eine neuartige Online-Verkostung, wo nicht nur einfach über Wein geredet wird, sondern wo Andreas Wickhoff, Master of Wine, wirklich auf akademischem Niveau erklären wird, wie man Weine analysiert, wie man sie verkostet als Profi und da eben eine gewisse Struktur in die Verkostungsablauf hineinbringt. Und damit es aber eben auch nicht nur eine akademische Trockenübung ist, sondern man die Theorie dann schön auch in die Praxis überführen kann, haben wir natürlich die Weine sowohl den Studenten als auch euch mit dem Abothek Remote Tasting Lab Spezialkistel auch schon zukommen lassen. Beziehungsweise kann man sich auch noch zukommen lassen. Und der Andreas wird ihm anhand von 3 sehr schönen exemplarischen Weinen diese Prinzipien erklären. Also lange Rede, kurzer Sinn. Wir freuen uns, dass ihr dabei seid. Das wird nicht nur interessant, sondern auch lustig. Entspannt euch, nehmt euch ein Glas Wein und ich übergebe das Wort jetzt gleich an Andreas. Und noch dazu zu sagen, Andreas wird das auf Englisch machen, weil der Bachelor of International Wine Business, für den dieser Kurs ja gemacht wurde, komplett auf Englisch gemacht wird. Und und deshalb übergebe ich jetzt und werde auch weiter jetzt auf Englisch kommentieren. Viel Spaß!
Hello, welcome everyone to the Remote Tasting Lab. My name is Andreas Wickhoff. Welcome from Langenlois, from the Kamptaler region, and it is my pleasure to tell you today a little bit about how to address wines on a more professional level, what to consider when we taste wine, how to conclude with a quality assessment when it comes to wine, and what it makes important in terms of the overall atmosphere when you're tasting wine. Now, ideally, we would like to probably do this in the morning, because in the morning the tasting buds are probably the most sharp and the most accurate to perceive. What we should also take into consideration the way we feel, how the mood of ourselves on that day. We should try to refrain from any type of influences from outside, being the surrounding. It should be a nice lightening available. Natural light is the best possible light. The temperature of the room, obviously the temperature of the wine itself is very, very important and essential. And additionally, also the type of glassware that we use. In my case, I have the Zalto Universal glass, so all that plays a role. What we have just smelled will also play a role how we then perceive the wine. So we need to consider a couple things actually before we start looking at one wine before we go and smell and taste it. Now, basically, you can differentiate 4 different steps when addressing a wine and when to assess a wine. Sight, smell, taste are the first 3. So the visual appearance of a wine will tell us a little bit about the wine itself. It hardly can give us 100% evidence what the wine is and how the wine is going to be. But it gives us sometimes clues where this wine is standing in terms of age, what the overall content and texture of the wine is. This is the first step. Smell would be the second. The aroma is very key and elementary to the quality of wine. And last not least, the most important part is what's happening on the palate. So we're going to go through that. And then afterwards, we can also make a conclusion what these wines are like in terms of quality, in terms of aging potential. When I look at the first wine is from our winery. This is Grüner Veltliner Kamptaler Terrassen 2019. So the most recent vintage of Grüner Veltliner that we have here. And in terms of the site, this is in terms of the appearance, more gearing towards a medium lemon color that you see here. You can swirl the wine in the glass and then can look at the viscosity of the wine itself. Probably look at how fast or how slow the legs are going down the glass, or if there are any legs. That might tell you a little bit about the overall textural component, the body, the mouthfeel of this wine. Now, when we go to the aroma, we need to look at how intense is the aroma. Is it quite pronounced, or is it rather on the lighter side? For me, this has a medium intensity. Brings in actually quite nice, delicate aromas of elderflower, of citrus, lemon, lime peel, maybe some green apple hints that you have there. It's a youthful wine, so you have predominantly primary characters, and primary fruit characters will tell you this is a wine that is focusing on the fruit characters itself, derived from basically the grapes. So what I said, elderflower, maybe it's slightly leafy herbaceousness, and this green apple lemon hints. We're going on to the palate now. Yeah, I think this definitely has a refreshing acid component, a refreshing acid structure. In terms of quantity, I would say this has a medium acidity backbone. The body is on the medium side as well. The alcohol is medium too, so this is 12.5 alcohol. It has an enticing, spicy, peppery element on the palate. Again, lemon, lime, some herbal components, and the pepperiness to be found in there. For me, a very typical fruit characteristic of Grüner Veltliner. The flavor intensity, I would also consider that this is medium, with also a medium finish in a way. It has a lingering finish, but it's not massively persistent. This is more on the lighter side of wine. This is a wine that is bright, should probably consumed within the first 2 to 4 years after the vintage. And definitely a very good example of Grüner Veltliner, a very good example of the Kamptal appellation itself, with this rather cooling, refreshing elements. And I would not give it, as I said, a massive aging capacity here. This wine is intended more on the 2 to 4 year term. So this would be wine number 1 here.
Okay, I have a question. What would you say defines the freshness in the wine? What is responsible for the freshness?
I believe when it comes to freshness in this wine, it's most likely a combination of the acidity, which has some liveliness, but again, this tingling component deriving from the spice characters that will bring also some life into this wine. And of course, also the more green fruit characters. So you have this lime, lemon, lime peel elements that are all gearing more towards the refreshing side of things. So a combination of these 3 elements will probably give you this refreshing character.
Maybe can I also ask, and also in addition to that, is it, would you say, I mean, it's probably a combination of the climate and the soil in the Kamptal. What is the driving component, or it's a combination. And how do you emphasize this in the vinification to bring out this freshness and so on from this wine?
So in terms of climate and soil, we do have continental climate. The winds from the forest district, from the Waldviertel, from the north, are coming down. So generally speaking, as you also see with the planting here in the Kamptal region, white wine varietals are still obviously dominating. if it's red wine varietals, it is early ripening reds most of the time. And the soil for a wine like this, you have generally less spaced vineyards. These are sandy soil types, again deriving from the north, from the last ice age, a wind-blown sand that was deposited here in the area. And that also brings a little bit of methane concentration into this wine. And when it comes to purity and keeping the freshness, you want to make sure you have really healthy, ripe grapes. So a rigorous selection that takes place for the grapes before they will come into the press. And then it's a very classic way of vinification by not having any influence from a fermentation vessel. So you will have fermentation in stainless steel. The temperature of the alcoholic fermentation is not very high, so you keep the purity and freshness of this wine, and then have a lees aging for about 3 to 5 months, depending on the vintage, which gives a little bit of texture to that wine.
One last question. Yeah.
In terms of Grüner Veltliner itself, what would you say what's the signature of detecting a Kamptaler Grüner Veltliner from Weinviertel, or what's the differences in the grape variety itself? How would you describe it? What is the signature of the Kamptal in terms of Grüner?
Okay, if you compare it to Weinviertel, we're probably in terms of refreshing characters not too far off, because the Weinviertel also brings out quite a bit of lively characters most of the time for their Weinviertel Grüners. Now, what I believe is probably then what distincts us from the Weinviertel is probably a touch more fruit concentration or flavor intensity that you probably get from the Kamptal wines, without losing the freshness. And so therefore maybe a touch more riper lime characters, green apple, but ripe green apple, as opposed to maybe even the cooler components that you would have in the Weinviertel, whilst the Wachau might even have a little bit more concentration of all these elements, a little bit more textural components. So we are sort of, I think, in between these two appellations that we discussed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's move on to wine number 2. Wine number 2 is now a Chardonnay, 2018. I poured myself already a little bit beforehand just to look what this wine is like. The wine is called Le Baron from Philipp Geimüller and Charlie Roll. This is the appellation is Weinland in this case. This is Weinland Österreich. And when we look at this wine now but it's Krems style appellation where the vineyards are located. When we look at the appearance of the wine, in terms of the intensity, I would not say that this is a lot more intense than the first wine. So I would again give it more on the medium side, medium lemon side, or we could say a pale golden color. Let's have a swirl in the glass, look at the viscosity, probably a touch more tears that are coming down a little bit slower as compared to that first one. Could be an indication a little bit more concentration, a little bit more power that we find in this wine. Now, in terms of smelling, certainly different than the first one, because there's, I would not say a developed character, but a developing character. So the secondary elements, the elements of vinification and winemaking and aging is coming for a little bit more. You probably have a little bit riper pear characters here, maybe a little bit of mango, some hazelnuts, some nice roasted hazelnuts that you find in there, some roasted nuts or roasted poppy seeds that you sometimes have on the roll. So it actually builds up layers already in the aroma. I think the intensity is medium, almost gearing towards medium plus, so it has a very good aroma intensity. In terms of the taste, For Chardonnay, I think a really lively, refreshing acidity component that you find in there. The alcohol for me is medium. There is a medium plus fruit intensity and flavor intensity. We again find some more pear and maybe golden delicious apple characters in here. Roasted nuts are coming back here again, some toastedness that you find. So it gives you a clue. This wine should be aged in oak casks, probably of smaller size, barrique to 300 liters. But this is very well integrated because it does not overpower really the fruit concentration of this wine, the flavor concentration. The length, it has a medium plus finish for me, so it has a little bit longer, lingering finish. This wine is probably also intended to be aged for a bit longer. It still has a youthful character, but again, on the palate, you find these maturation characters of the wine where it took place. Very good concentration. So we need to consider again in our tasting profile the acidity, the alcohol. We have done that, the flavor characteristics, the intensity of the flavor characteristics, the finish. Of course, we have to see. I think this is a very good wine to conclude with. Has a very good balance. You have good fruit concentration, but at the same time, the oak aging is well integrated, so it gives another layer to that wine. I could see this wine being aged for another 5 to 7 years. The acidity will keep it going, and therefore a very good aging capacity as well. Sounds like a well-crafted, well-made wine here.
Philip, I have a question. Do you know how it is exactly produced in terms of fermentation and barrel aging, maturation on the lees?
If I may answer here, Andreas, I'm not the winemaker. It's a vineyard of our own, and Charlie Roll did it. He's from Burgundy, and the idea was here to make a Chardonnay from Austria, but really with a distinctive Burgundy touch. And it's spontaneously fermented, and really, I would say, a minimum intervention wine. So really done with very little technique in the wine cellar. And really, as Andreas already pointed out, it's in a used barrique, made in used barrique, and also did a what's it called? BSA, Säureabbau, what's the English term?
Malolactic fermentation.
Malolactic fermentation, and this all adds to I think the roundedness of the wine, and thank you, Andreas. I think it's a very good description, and this is.
What does malolactic fermentation exactly mean? What is this?
Okay, so when this is a very good point to raise, because when we look between wine number 1 and wine number 2, wine number 1 has not seen malolactic fermentation, while wine number 2 has tamed this malic acid component, which is rather on the harsher side. So malic acid is one of the acidity elements that you find in the grapes and in the wine, and you can transfer it with bacteria into the lactic acid, which gives the wine more roundedness, more creaminess, also a little bit more texture. Now, with wines that are generally higher in acidity, you probably want to tame that harsher acidity down, and you can do this with this malolactic fermentation, or we call it also secondary fermentation in the barrel. Most of the time, this is done in the barrel. Some people start to do it in the stainless steel or in a neutral vessel as well, but a lot of the people let the wine undergo the malolactic fermentation in barrels.
Yeah, I think it's, if I may add also, I think this is very interesting here to see these two wines in comparison, because this is they are very good examples of these different styles. I would say, right, Andreas? If you do you agree? Because the one is really fresh, very nice. Also. Wine that you always is very nice to drink, and the other one is also nice to drink, but is a little bit maybe softer and has a different style. And I think it's very interesting. Maybe if you don't take it if you don't think about it, you maybe don't notice it that directly. But in this case, it really makes one wine by each other, and I think this is very interesting.
Yes, although I would say that there are even more overt examples of this buttery, creamy character that malolactic fermentation can bring out. This wine shows, I think, a very nice French signature here. In a way, you feel that there's a lot of balance, and the aim is here not to have this rich character that sometimes you can get of a combination of malolactic fermentation and élevage maturation in oak barrels. So this is still very well tamed and has a good, refreshing character. Yeah.
Very good, thank you.
But also, like this Chardonnay, for me, it's more like a fruit wine. We need something to eat. It's more complex. It's very good wine to drink, but I would prefer on a sunny day drinking the Grüner Veltliner from Bründlmayer and this maybe for dinner or lunch. So, and especially when it's a very powerful wine like this, it's more likely to use it as a pairing or...
Actually, what food would you pair with this wine?
In terms of food pairing here, we could look at a little bit more substantial food because the wine has more concentration, more matter. I'd still be inclined to go with refined fish or seafood dishes. When we talk about local or regional fish, then you would probably gear more towards pike perch. Trout is too light for me here. So pike perch or something with more substance and matter from a river or a lake from our areas. When we go to seafood, I could see it with coquille Saint-Jacques. So scallops would probably have a very nice pairing because you also have a nice textural component often with scallops, but they are not overpowering, but they have a deeper flavor intensity, the scallops, without being too overbordering. I think for lobster or something even more substantial, this might be even too light and too refined. Then you probably need even a more concentrated and more powerful, denser example here. But I'd rather be inclined to go with nice fish dishes. But honestly, also with veal, some veal dishes that you find in our area, definitely also worth having a look at with this wine. While the first wine is certainly more geared towards, a lighter style. So here we can talk about trout with the Grüner Veltliner. Here we can talk about light antipasti, as Alexander mentioned it. So more on a summer day as an aperitif wine, even a good aperitif wine, a very good aperitif wine, I would say. But rather on the lighter side. And if we talk about foreign cuisine, we can talk about sashimi. We could talk about nigiri in a way. But again, the lighter sashimi and nigiri examples that we would take there.
So I also have a question. The wine is made with no intervention. What do you think about that style of wine? Do you find it's important for a cellar to use a lot of technology, or how would you consider that?
So I would say minimum intervention is always a word or two words that are being interpreted in different ways. I'm personally not a big fan of just hearing, we pick the grape and then we don't do anything in the cellar. Then I don't think you get a very good wine out of it. What I think a good approach of minimum intervention winemaking is that you take good care of the wine during a fermentation period, during the aging period, but you're not over masking or overpowering or influencing it too much with either a massive control of fermentation, with either a massive movement of the must and the wine during fermentation and aging. If you take a gentle approach with batonnage, for example, if you have a lees aging where you don't move the lees all too much, I think then you can get very, very fine results out of this. And it seems that with the second wine and the first wine, both was the case, yeah?
Yeah, okay, thanks. I have a question too. The wine is made out of the harvest 2018, and I remember that it was a hot year. And what does a hot year influence the wine?
So a hot vintage obviously will bring you, depending on how hot it is, but if it's too hot, the grape itself and the vine itself might even stop producing anything. So neither sugar nor acidity nor anything. In 2018, this was definitely one of the hottest years on record. But I also think that the winemakers themselves have learned from the really first hot vintage in Europe, 2003 onwards, by adapting the soil management, by adapting the leaf canopy management, and by also the timing of the harvest. So if you take these three things carefully into consideration over your vegetative cycle and then at the harvest, then you can get balanced results, as we see here with the 2018 Chardonnay, also out from a hot vintage. We need to be looking at this a lot more closer these days because these vintages have become more obvious and can come across more often. So it will normally impart, of course, a richer flavor concentration, generally more alcohol, more subtle acidity approach. So you will get a creamier, more powerful wine, generally speaking. But the skilled winemakers and the skilled vignerons will find the best practices to also counteract this.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you very much.
Move on to wine number 3.
Mm-hmm.
Wine number 3, as you see, is a red example now. And this is the Marqués de Velilla 2018 Joven. So it's a fairly young wine from Spain, from Ribera del Duero. The grape variety is Tinta del País. So another word for it would be Tempranillo, which is also the most important variety in the Rioja, in the famous Rioja region. When we look at the color, now with red, we see, of course, a little bit more probably color perspectives. So we have the rim, which has almost still like a slightly purple hue here. And then inside has probably a medium ruby intensity. You can still somewhat look through the wine itself. I can still see my hand, for instance, here. When looking at the wine itself, please make sure you have a white cloth or a white paper underneath. This is the best way to identify the color. And again, natural light is very, very good. Let's look at the viscosity, at the tears, and then we see compared to 1 and 2, the tears are going down even a little bit slower. Might again be an indication, slightly higher glycerol content, and the alcohol could be a little bit higher.
But is it also a sign for sugar?
So glycerol, in a way, is combined in a way with sugar, and I know what you mean or what you say when we look at Beerenauslesen or Trockenbeerenauslesen, so really sweet wines, dessert wines. You will definitely have those tears coming down also slower. Absolutely. So this goes in hand. The color is a better evidence factor for fortified wines and sweet wines at times. Also due to the fact, because of the viscosity that you see, that you can probably then say, okay, this might have a little higher residual sugar content. However, in this case, this is a dry wine. It cannot tell you right away it is 100% related to a higher sugar content. Okay.
It's also when we look at the tiers and we have the colored tiers, can this give more or less an indication of the climate or the grape variety itself?
So again, I would not spend too much time on the sight and the appearance. I told you beforehand, appearance can give you some clues, but they cannot give you an evidence. I think once you go closer to the palate, so by looking at the wine and then obviously also by tasting the wine, then you should be like a detective and then prove yourself like a lawyer when you have clear evidences on the palate. The visual aspect can give you some clues, but never 100% confirmation that this is the case, okay? Now, this has a very nice medium plus fruit intensity. I think it's still very useful. So the primary fruit characters here absolutely are dominating. I don't see a lot of secondary characters and of course no tertiary characters. The tertiary characters would refer to what's been going on in the bottle then. So the development in the bottle itself. I see a clear concentration here on primary fruit characters.
Maybe Andreas, can you quickly explain what's the main difference between primary, secondary, and tertiary characters?
Certainly, I can go through that again. So primary fruit characters are really predominantly deriving from the grape itself. As you know, there are flavor compounds within the cell of a grape underneath the skin, and these characters can then go anywhere from what we said, from green apple, lemon, lime in the case of the Grüner Veltliner, to pear, to riper apple characters as we find in the Chardonnay. And then here what we have, these nice blueberry characters, really nice intense red berries and blueberries characters. This would be primary fruit characters. Secondary fruit characters are referring to what has been happening in the cellar, basically. The characters derived from the aging process, and this could include the end of fermentation, and then could go into the aging process. So what can we get out of lees aging, the vessel that we have used for aging, for the maturation, before we actually go into the bottle? The tertiary characters are developing with the aging in the bottle itself. So these are basically characters that are going on with a further aging in our cellar. What develops there? This would be the tertiary fruit characters that you then find in there. This could be more gearing towards a nuttiness, a darker roasted character, some leathery components in there, some earthiness, etc. Yeah. So again, we are focusing here on primary fruit characters. Very nice intensity. I think this is a very pretty, youthful wine. Does it have layers in the aroma? No, I don't think so much. So it's very much geared towards this primary fruit component. For people who are enjoying fruit-driven wines, they will like this style. To the palate. This wine shows to me a medium acidity. It's still present, the acidity, but it's well-rounded. There is a medium plus alcohol, I would say. So you feel a little bit more body and mouthfeel. You have more concentration of the elements. Obviously, when we come to red wine, we need to discuss the tannin. So we need to discuss the level of tannins here. I think this is more on the lower tannin side. It has actually soft and ripe tannins. So we need to discuss the level of the tannins and then also the what the tannins look like. Are they soft, mature, or are they harsh? Are they astringent? Are they green? This is definitely more on the softer, rounder side of things, because It's not drying out your tongue and your front palate very much. It's very well rounded. It has a medium plus fruit concentration for me in the on the palate. Again, these beautiful blueberry characters come out to me. Maybe some light, not fully ripe plums that you find in this wine. Very pretty, very pleasant, pleasing, good fruit concentration, a good mouthfeel body with a medium finish. I would say this wine is intended as being consumed more on the younger side. It's drinking very well now, but can definitely consumed within the next 3 to 5 years maximum. I would rather gear towards 2 to 4 years, because here the intention is to bring the people a fruit-driven, easy-to-approach wine. A nice example, maybe to go with an easy barbecue, for instance.
What is the typical wine style of Ribera del Duero?
So Ribera del Duero wine style, how typical? I think it's as with many appellations, not always so easy to say this is Ribera del Duero, but I think you can get some of the most sought after and greatest wines out of there. One of the most expensive, and used to be the most expensive wine from Spain, comes from this appellation, Marqués de Velilla, which brings in a wine of great concentration, aging capacity, very much layered. I would say Ribera del Duero brings a good fruit composition always in the wines, without getting it too flabby and too only bold and rich. It always also has a structural backbone component, especially with the Crianza and Reserva wines. This is a Joven. There is more this roundedness, this fruit-drivenness, but this is more the style of the wine, not so much the typical only Ribera del Duero signature here.
And what is typical for the region there?
So again, I would say fruit concentration is definitely always present. A very good red fruit component, sometimes blueberries, darker red fruit sides. The body is actually always still on the medium plus to higher level side. So there's a lot of matter, a lot of concentration that you find in these wines without getting only focused on this. There is always, especially with Tinta del País, with Tempranillo, you always have still an acid structure and component that counteracts this full-bodiedness. But you should expect more full-bodied wine from Ribera del Duero.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
sorry.
Sorry, you mentioned this was a Joven. What does this mean in terms of the classification?
So Joven is young for Spanish, basically, and this tells you that the wine can be released already in the year after the vintage. So this is 2018. We can, this winery here was releasing this wine most likely in the second half of 2019. There's a maximum aging of Joven wines for 6 months, very often less than 6 months. And the intention here is more, as I said, on the primary fruit side, easy to enjoy wines, ready to drink, on the more simpler approach.
Thank you.
And is the Tempranillo, because we were talking about tannins, because of its tannin structure, particularly prepared or suitable for this style of wine? How does this relate? I mean, Tempranillo, is it generally a variety that has is strong in tannins, or how would you characterize this?
Mm-hmm. I would not clearly say it's a strong it has a strong tannin structure. Tempranillo can bring in structure with the tannin, but you need to work them accordingly. If we compare it on an international scale, and if we look at Cabernet Sauvignon or Cabernet Franc, we will be less in the tannin structure, generally speaking, for Tempranillo. It's not lacking. It's not like Dolcetto or Gamay or Zweigelt in our area, which has really more moderate minus tannins, so to say. But again, not this full structure component that you might expect from the Bordeaux grape varieties like Malbec or Petit Verdot. They would have more tannin structure there compared to Tempranillo.
Okay. But when you talk about tannin structure and work on them, in Spain, we like when I see at Rioja, we have a lot of like oak maturation. They use American oak. Does this help the tannins, especially with Tempranillo, to bring out more body or to extract also tannins from the barrels?
Yes, to some extent, the élevage will definitely play a role. You mentioned Rioja. You know, there are always there are two different styles, main styles, I think, of Rioja. The traditional way, which is very oxidative winemaking, long aging in the cask, and these wines have tannin structure from both the maturation process, but also the way the grapes have been macerated. And then you have this more French oak reductive winemaking of Rioja, which gears then more towards a polished Bordeaux-esque style of wine. And these wines will probably have a more pronounced tannin framework from the higher proportion probably of new French oak, as opposed to these traditional Rioja wines with a higher component of American oak, but less new oak, for instance, and a longer oxidative vinification style. So we need to look at these components, how the winemaker tends to use the aging regime, the origin of the oak, oxidative versus reductive winemaking.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I also have a question. To which food would you compare this wine?
As I mentioned briefly before, I think we should not look at very complex food components here, because this wine has one goal: to be cheerful, joyful, and fruit-driven. Let's think about a barbecue on a warm day, and you slightly even chill this wine to maybe 14 to 16 degrees Celsius, and it will be an easy crowd pleaser, which can go with sausages there, a hanger steak, chicken on the barbecue, chicken skewers, anything of that sort will be easily enjoyable with this wine. I'm not going into a filet mignon style of wine. You need more finesse, you need more layers, you need more complexity in this wine. But that's not the way this wine is intended to be.
Is this due to the suitability for these types of food? Is it because it also has a nice acidic structure? Does this help to go well with like barbecue and so on? Because my impression is that it also has very nice acidity that helps maybe with this food. Is it something that you would agree?
I think the acidity is present, but overall, I think this wine has just a dominance of these beautiful fruit characters, and it's not. This would then tell you, okay, you can pair it with all different sorts of food from the barbecue. Or let's look at a simple snack, a Jause, we would call it here in Austria, where you have different cold cuts, different sorts of cheeses. It has to match a lot of different flavors. I think this then will be also a nice partner there. The acidity is there, but the dominant part in this wine is definitely this nice fruit composition that you find, this fruit salad here, yeah?
Very nice. Thank you very much. Maybe Andreas, maybe put the three bottles next to each other and let's make one last comparison maybe.
Absolutely. So here here are these three wines again. Serving temperature is, of course, also one thing that is key for enjoying perfectly the wine. So for this wine here, I'm really gearing more towards the 8 to 9 degrees Celsius side. The Chardonnay here, could have a touch warmer, so anything from 9 to 11 or so would be very suitable here. And this, as I said, I mean, when you enjoy it like a red wine on a normal day, I think 15 to 16 degrees would be perfect. But probably also when you slightly chill it, as I said, on a hot summer day for barbecue, it will work really well. So please consider also the serving temperature.
Just one more question regarding that oxygen. How important is that? Would you recommend to decant the wines with the different styles? How does it influence the character when drinking it?
Of course, exposing it to oxygen will have an impact. Just like the closure will have an impact here with screw cap versus natural cork that the second wines will have. The first wine definitely does not need decanting. And as you know, we also have a lot of aeration going on when we swirl the wine in the glass. And this is the fastest way of exposing the wine to oxygen. With the second wine being a 2018 and has a little bit more ambitious approach, I would be able, or I would suggest to have this maybe decanted if you enjoy it now within this year, maybe decanted an hour before enjoyment. The third wine here, the red Ribera del Duero, does not require decanting here because again, the intention is to focus and keep the youthful fruit aromas going. It will not really benefit from exposing it to more air.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any last questions from your side, from the audience? So yes, thank you very much, Andreas, for this very interesting lecture, and I think we all learned a lot, and very interesting, I think, to show this really with the wines, and this will be, I think, also you, of course, we will continue drinking it now, and have a good day. And yeah, just wanted to point out, yeah, this is the box with the 3 wines. I think it's a very instructive box, but not only a theory, but very entertaining as well. And so you can you can order these wines with the box from Abothek, and also enjoy it afterwards at home. Thank you all for listening and being with us, and have a nice day, stay safe, and see you soon, hopefully.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you also. Enjoy some good wine. Thank you.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Cheers.